Welcome everyone to this video. William Blake is going to be the focus of this video and how to use his poetry to write a paragraph of analysis in response to a specific question. This video is aimed at those of you who are studying Blake as part of your A-level and who may be studying the Political and Social Protest Writing module on the AQA Literature Spec B course. The question is one that has already come up in previous years, and just like in other videos, this is not so much about analysing the poems, because let's say you've got to a stage where you've already done that. This is more to do with how you write about them and how you apply your knowledge of the poems to a particular question. The golden rule with Literature Spec B is that you always answer the question that is asked and you don't go off task. And that is why you can see here in this question that I have highlighted in blue the most important part of the question, because it tells you what the rest of your essay is going to be on. This is an essay about authority figures and whether or not they are always cruel and unkind. So some of you might do a bit of both. You might agree and say yes, they are cruel and unkind. Some of you might disagree and say, no, they're not always cruel and unkind. And you can do either, as long as it is true that you're talking about authority figures in your essay. This is a question where you don't really want to be talking about institutions like the education system or the government or the church, because authority figures really means individuals, and in Blake's case they are usually things like parents, nurses, or individual people rather than organisations or institutions. So that is the best way to get marks for this question. When you think about the mark scheme, in order to get band 4, your work needs to be thorough, and if you want to get band 5, your work needs to be perceptive, and that's where I'm aiming this video at, towards the top end of the mark scheme, in order to show you what you could write in order to get towards the top of the mark scheme. Okay, so we're going to be using in this poem Nurse's Song, and we're going to be using it to disagree with this task, because the nurse in Nurse's Song in Innocence is actually not particularly cruel or unkind. So I'm going to show you how you could disagree with this question by using that poem. So in order to show you what to write, I'm going to be typing onto this document as you watch. So apologies if there are any spelling errors or any grammar errors. I'll either pick those up as I go along, or I'll go back at the end when I reread the paragraph to double check everything is in order. So you could start this paragraph by saying the Innocence version, because you want to make it clear that there are two versions of Nurse's Song. The Innocence version of Nurse's Song refutes, which means disagrees with, the statement that authority figures are always unkind and cruel. Some students might even underline the word always here, because it suggests that they understand that that is the area of disagreement. And it's not a simple case of saying they're all cruel and unkind. So some students sometimes underline words in their writing to make up for the fact that we don't have italics if you're writing by hand anyway. And let's just finish by saying in Blake's poetry. Okay, so the fact this is the topic sentence, the fact that I have reused those terms cruel and unkind, means I'm on task and that they can't accuse me of being off task. And then I just go into that poem in more detail in terms of picking at it, in terms of which bits of it I want to use. So in this poem, a nurse, let's say, who represents a caregiver and nurturer, takes glee and feels happy from watching, and she also hears the children on the green playing, and laughing on the hill. Happy from watching your children on the green playing and laughing on the hill. Great. These sounds make her feel content because, as she says, her heart is at rest within her breast. I'm changing that word hurt from my to her because obviously I'm not her, so I'm changing that in brackets. Within her breast. And this creates a sense of calmness. Okay, so that's from the first stanza. Typical of Blake, and that word typical suggests that I don't just know this poem, I know the collection as a whole. Typical of Blake, the falling sun or darkness metaphorically alludes to the ominous approach of experience and adulthood. There's other poems where that's the case. In the second stanza, she asks the children to come home because the sun is the sun has gone down. Just making sure the grammar is right for my sentence. She asks children to come home because the sun has gone down. However, and this is where you can bring in knowledge of the other nurse's song, unlike the counterpart poem in Experience, the children are allowed a voice in the third stanza, and they respond that they would rather keep playing outdoors because they wouldn't be able to sleep anyway, and nature is also still awake. To this, the nurse responds by allowing the children to keep playing and does not impose her rules, desires, or restrictions onto the children. Let's just put here, go and play. What else does she say? Let me look at the poem. Till light fades away. So next to me I have the poem, as you would in the exam, because this is an open book. Go and play till light fades away. This in turn makes the children, how do they feel? Euphoric is a good word. Euphoric and delighted. I'm going to link to the verbs represented by the syndetic list, because they're in a list with the conjunction of verbs. Leaped and laughed and leaped and shouted. Sorry, and laughed in the last stanza. Oops. Remember, this is an open book exam. You need to be quoting much more liberally from the text than you would do in a closed book. That's the kind of unspoken agreement you have with the examiner. If they're going to permit you the text, they want to see more quoting from it. And that's what I'm trying to do here. In the last stanza, and the hills echoed with their joy. As a result, This poem does not, link it back to the question now. This poem does not depict a cruel or unkind nurse, but one who listens to the children's desires and democratically allows them to choose what they want to do, in this case, to keep playing in harmony with nature. All right, let me just make that slightly bigger because I didn't need all that space. There we go. So I'm going to reread through this, and if I have made any errors, I'll tweak them. But again, by this point, I would probably want to move on to another poem, and I could either pick another poem where there is a positive relationship or authority figures who aren't cruel or unkind, or I could disagree with this and say, actually, yes. I could agree with this and say, actually, yes, authority figures are cruel and unkind, but I'm not necessarily agreeing they're always cruel and unkind. So this is just one poem. You're aiming for section B, maybe to write about 3 poems. It depends on the length of the poem and the amount of detail you want to go into. But usually 3 is where students tend to be at when they're writing a section B answer. And of course, you might be writing about Blake for section C as well with another text. In that case, you're maybe writing about 1 or 2 poems from Blake in order to meet the requirement of the question and talk about 2 texts. So let me read through this then. The Innocents version of Nurse's song refutes the statement that authority figures are always unkind and cruel in Blake's poetry. In this poem, a nurse who represents a caregiver and nurturer takes glee and feels happy from watching and hearing children on the green, playing and laughing on the hill. These sounds make her feel content because her heart is at rest within her breast, and this creates a sense of calmness. Typical of Blake, the falling sun or darkness metaphorically alludes to the ominous approach of experience and adulthood. In the second stanza, she asks the children to come home because the sun has gone down. However, unlike the counterpart poem in Experience, the children are allowed a voice in the third stanza, and they respond that they would rather keep playing outdoors because they wouldn't be able to sleep anyway, and nature is also still awake. To this, the nurse responds by allowing the children to keep playing and does not impose her rules, desires, or restrictions onto the children. Go and play till light fades away. This in turn makes the children euphoric and delighted, represented by the syndetic list of verbs leaped and shouted and laughed in the last stanza, and the hills echoed with their joy. As a result, the poem does not depict a cruel or unkind nurse, but one who listens to the children's desires and democratically allows them to choose what they want to do, in this case, to keep playing in harmony with nature. No, I wrote that quite well. It's unusual for me. But yeah, so that is what a paragraph of this essay might look like. So hopefully that was useful. And good luck with your studies. Thank you.